Mike, thank you so much for joining us today for ACG Cleveland's 40th anniversary celebration. You've had an amazing career, founding member of Brown, Gibbons, Lang and Company, and amazing member of the business community here in Cleveland. So over the course of your career, I'm sure you've experienced many great transactions,
yes, I have.
Worked with many great businesses. Is there one that sticks out in your mind as being most memorable?
Well, I think a lot of the transactions we do are kind of vanilla. I mean, it's once you get a process down, they all kind of resemble each other. But there are some that kind of stand out. We sold what at the time was the largest independent ironworks foundry in the world, and it was an old company in Neenah, Wisconsin. In fact, if you wandered around Cleveland and look at the sewer covers, you'll see Neenah Foundries on them. And at the time, foundries didn't carry a high multiple, and we were unsure of what it would be like. And we went up there and we discovered it was probably the most efficient foundry we'd ever been in. And over my career, I had spent a lot of time working with foundries. I had done, in my beginnings of my career, I'd done a lot of pollution control financing, and they usually were in pretty tough shape. And this was the most efficient foundry I'd ever been in. I mean, it literally, the scrap rates were minuscule. It was highly mechanized. It was just a great company. And we were anxious to win the assignment, and we were competing against some large New York firms, and ultimately we did. But I remember it because it almost didn't close. And we had the highest price we had ever seen for a foundry, a multiple that at the time was 7.5 or 8 times, which was extraordinary at the time. And this is quite a few years ago. But the deal stalled on the basis of a pretty unusual thing. There were 4 Green Bay Packer tickets that were owned by the company. And we were almost to the closing table when the acquirer, which was at the time Citibank Capital, I guess it was Citicorp Capital, said they wanted the Green Bay Packer tickets. And the owners, and this is a company that was founded in the 1840s, the owners said, "We will not sell if we have to give up the Green Bay Packer tickets."
Passionate football fans.
Yes, and ultimately, we stalled for a couple of weeks trying to negotiate the Green Bay Packer tickets. I still remember getting off I-90 out on the west side when my client said, "I'm not selling, and I'm not kidding." And I remember talking to Citibank, and it was like, he's serious about it. And ultimately, the family retained the Green Bay Packer tickets. But I've thought, here's a multiple $100 million transaction that was literally stopping because of 4 tickets to a football game up in season tickets to a football team up in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That's incredible.
Yes.
That's incredible. And I bet going into that transaction, you never imagined that would become a negotiating point.
We thought it was interesting. They had them, and it was no big deal, and it was very important to that family.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So, the course of your career, I'm sure you've experienced many ups and downs and difficult situations. What is one of the most memorable obstacles you faced, and how did that shape your perspective on business or more wholly on life in general?
Well, actually, it shaped how we designed our business over a period of time, because our business is very cyclical, and the cyclicality, you have to prepare for it. And we may be at this very point in time heading to a slow period for M&A. And we've tried to diversify our transactional mix. About 10 or 12 years ago, I always had an affinity for real estate. I had been very involved in the formation of a number of REITs in the mid-90s and had learned a lot from that. Had ended up on the board of a New York Stock Exchange REIT and felt there was a crying need for somebody that could do the same kind of thing an M&A banker could do for a real estate entity. And we jumped over and started in that field, and it's been a very successful enterprise for us. And I think it's somewhat countercyclical. You also have to be able to be fast on your feet when M&A is is scarce. You've got to be able to have the capabilities to do workouts, to do restructurings. You've got to be able to fall back on other transactions that can keep the lights on. Because unfortunately, a lot of people in the investment banking industry have built a lifestyle that they don't want to give up just because the market's cyclical. And we've been able to do that successfully over the 30 plus years we've been in business.
So being adaptable and nimble,
yes,
and you've got to be pivot and shift.
You've got to recognize opportunities. You've got to find things that can help iron out that cyclicality. Yes.
Yeah. What is one thing over the course of your career that you might have done differently, looking back on it, or alternatively, one thing you would never change if you had the chance to?
Well, when I started the firm, I didn't have any capital to speak of. And I think a number of people over the years have formed investment banks, and I think if you have a reserve of capital, it makes your life a lot, you can sleep a lot better. And so if you don't have the capital, given the baking time it takes for a transaction to get closed, you've got to really live pretty meagerly during that period, and that slowed our growth early on, and it made things a lot more exciting, I guess is the best way to put it. You can never count on a closing, and because it takes 6 to 9 months many times to get a transaction done, I wish I would have had that reserve of capital. I started out with an individual that could have provided that, and in fact, the Brown Gibbons Lang was an individual, as an architect that my original thought was we were going to do private equity, and unfortunately, Kevin Brown, who I will forever credit for giving me the bravery to start this firm, was killed about a month and a half after we started the organization in an offshore powerboat race. And it tested my fortitude, let's put it that way. So I think if I would have done it over again, I think I would have tried to find another source of capital after Kevin no longer was with us. It was a tragic accident. Guy was 37 years old, and I still think about him often. But he was the one that was kind of the guy that gave me enough confidence to go forward. And I didn't have a replacement for him.
Do you think that the lack of capital was used as fuel? Do you think that is maybe part of the success story? It's a blessing in disguise.
It does add several hours a day to your work day. Yeah, it's you will work harder if you don't have capital, and we've proven that. It's the things have changed over the years, but in the early stages, when I look back, it would have been a great thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Cleveland's really a great business community. We've got great organizations like ACG Cleveland. Can you talk about how the business community has helped you along the way and the value of our business community?
I think actually the attitude of Clevelanders has helped us. I can't tell you how many times we've traveled to California to pitch a deal and we've won the transaction, and largely on the basis that we're not New Yorkers. And the characteristic of Clevelanders is that we're open, friendly people that don't wear our opinion of ourselves on our sleeve. And we recognize that hard work goes along with, obviously, knowledge of the industry. But I think Clevelanders are a friendly, cordial group of people that you don't see a lot of other places in this country. Mm-hmm. And I think our business community is generally like that. And if we're going to operate in Cleveland, and Cleveland's a pretty minor part of our business now, but in the beginning, when you start a firm, you start close to home. And in my case, they were welcoming. I grew up in pretty meager circumstances, and I wasn't part of the business community. In fact, when I got out of college and got a scholarship to business school, I didn't even know a businessman. And my parents passed away without really understanding what I did. But it didn't matter in Cleveland. They wanted to see people that that understood what their role was, that would work hard and try to give value for the fees that we charge.
Yeah. No one is able to achieve the level of success that you've been able to achieve on their own. There's always someone along the way who helps them, who's a mentor to them. Do you recall a particular mentor or piece of advice they gave you that shaped your career? And
I've had a lot of those people in my life. I've been very fortunate. There was a guy named John O'Brien that hired me out of business school at McDonald and Company that I often credit with trusting some kid that grew up in Parma to be able to work at a place like McDonald. And there weren't a lot of Parma guys running around the firm at the time. But I ended up working in one of the roles I had at McDonald's is in the public finance area. And I had a guy named Charlie Kilroy. And the day I started in his department, and I had come over from the bond trading desk. I had been on the capital markets side for the first 3 or 4 years I was there. And started with Charlie. Charlie was kind of a legendary guy in public finance. And he took me into the back conference room that we had behind the public finance department. He said, "Mike, I want you to repeat after me. Never lie." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "Repeat after me. I will never lie." And he made me do it 3 or 4 times. And over the years, I recognize the value of that advice. Investment bankers often think that they can get by embellishing or by not telling the absolute truth. And it's something that we teach everybody that starts with our firm. You can do a transaction. You don't have to fully disclose information that shouldn't be disclosed to. If you're selling a business, you have to tell everybody what the bids are. But you never want to even embellish or exaggerate in any way. I think you tell the truth. And people respect that. And I think if your clients know that you're going to tell the truth and you tell them that we're going to expose the good and the bad parts of this business, or we're going to try to explain to a potential buyer, if we're doing an M&A transaction, what the issues are. First of all, I think the buyers end up respecting you, and ultimately you win over the client, and he's satisfied with what you've done for them, and you've done it the right way.
Yeah.
And I think it's a theme that I will, until the last day I work, I'll be telling the people I work with is the most important thing we can do.
Yeah, never lie, personal integrity.
That's right.
The rest will fall into place.
Correct.
Yeah, excellent. So outside of your business dealings, you've supported many charities locally. Can you talk about maybe one of your favorite charities and what it means to you?
There's been a number of them. I'm still involved with a number of them. Less intensively in the past. I think of all the organizations that have helped Cleveland, I'm most impressed with what the Sports Commission has done for Cleveland. I don't know if people are aware of the leadership of a guy named Dave Gilbert. We have brought more economic benefit to this city than I think any other organization. It's an incredible board. There's a lot of very prominent people on it. I was fortunate enough to get on it early. In fact, I was on the first board. And over the years, I had frankly done as much as I possibly could to help it. But bringing the kinds of dollars into this community and the kind of events into this community, you probably don't realize if you live in Cleveland that not every city has the kinds of sporting events that we've been able to bring into this community. You've just seen it over the last few years with the All-Star Game, NBA All-Star Game, the NFL Draft. This is all the creation of the Sports Commission. The senior games, just things that cities our size don't normally even have a chance at getting.
And recently the Pan American Games, right?
If we have them, I haven't heard about it yet. But, and I have become less. I was vice chairman for 10 years, and I never was able to get the time to be the chairman because it's a very time-intensive job. But I've just been marveled at the ability of the Sports Commission to bring economic opportunities to the city. And I would think of all the organizations I belong to, and I'm on the board recently of an organization called Values Matter. And the work they're doing is absolutely incredible. They work with school children and trying to teach them the values that will help them succeed in life. A guy named Stuart Mazinski is running that, and I'm totally impressed by what they do, and I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to help them out. But of all the things that I've seen or I've been involved in, I think the Sports Commission's done more for Cleveland than any other organization I know.
If there's one thing that you could change about the investment banking industry, if you had a magic wand, what would it be?
Well, I love the investment banking industry. I can't imagine doing something else. I couldn't think of anything I'd rather do. I guess I have a touch of ADD, and to be able to work on 4 or 5 different transactions and jump from one to another, not everybody's suited for it. But if you are, I think it's, I enjoy it. It's fun for me, and I don't think there's another thing I could do. I would say that the advent of cell phones was probably the greatest aid we had. I spent a lot more time at the office away from my family when it was difficult to get to have communication with your clients or with my coworkers, and the ease of communication has made that a lot easier.
Yeah, and with the remote work and ability to plug in literally from anywhere now, it's even more flexibility.
Yeah, and you really, I still think I think there's a real value to being together and working together, and I don't want to discount that. It's very important, and I think we've gone from almost totally remote working back to having people in the office, and that office time is important because you are a team, and it's hard to be a team when you're just talking to people on the cell phone.
Yeah. Absolutely, that personal touch of looking someone in the eye.
That's right.
And then training and culture.
And I think I've been a proponent of this. I think my partners would tell you this, but the world changes and we have to change with it. And I went through, a real trial by fire in my early stages of my career, and I worked an incredible number of hours. And I think there's been a change in the way young people view work, and I think we have to adapt to that, and I think we are. It's there were times when I was at McDonald and Company, and I was just to brag about it. I had never been on a vacation. Well, my kids, ultimately we did, but they suffered because I was always working. And I think we've got a better attitude about that. And I think, as my daughter says, Dad, you had trouble with your work-life balance early in life. And frankly, her work-life balance isn't exactly what she had planned for. But I think that's important. And we, as a firm, have tried to address that. We have, mandatory weekends off and mandatory vacation time. And I think you almost have to do that because you tend to get a lot of type A personalities in investment banking, and a lot of them are as nutty as I was, and they would never go away from the office if you didn't force them to. And life is more than just working.
What advice do you have for the next generation of young professionals, young investment bankers?
Well, as I said, I think it's the greatest job in the world, but it takes a certain kind of person, and it takes somebody that's willing to work very hard. To master the craft is a lengthy process. You're bringing in a number of different disciplines that you need to really understand at every level. But if you're willing to spend the time and the effort to put the work in to learn, accounting, tax, the legal side, to be able to relate to people and to relate to businessmen and try to understand what their goals are and you try to service those goals. I can't think of a better profession. Yeah. It's an exciting and rewarding profession.
Mike, very much appreciate you coming and talking with us.
Thanks for having me.